Shark Sports Radio begins right now. A Celtics fan and a Lakers fan on the same frequency? Oh, this should be good.
I think ultimately the Celtics find a way to hang banner 18 in 6.
In a world where sports media, lifestyles, humor, and commentary collide.
First time since signing LeBron, the Lakers have said, we don't give a shit about LeBron. We have to worry about the future.
Let's take a dive into this tank.
Tonight, for weeks to come, we'll continue Page Turner series. For those new to Page Turners, we give you a behind-the-scenes look at the sports books you all love. We bring on a sports author to discuss the book, what inspired them to write it, and how it connects to today's sports world. We appreciate everyone taking the dive into the tank tonight to check us out with Page Turners. You can tune in, use your Apple Podcast, SoundCloud, and or Spotify app. You can also watch us on YouTube at the Shark Sports Radio channel, TikTok at Shark Sports Radio. But be sure also to check us out on X at SSR34_. Aaron Bracy, founder of Big5Hoops.com, created the platform to share passion for sports writing in Philadelphia college basketball. He has been covering college sports and professional sports in Philadelphia since 1997. Throughout his career, Aaron has worked as a sports writer at the Trenton Times, a sports copy editor and TV radio columnist at the Courier Post, and sports editor at the Trentonian. Since 2008, he has also worked as a freelancer for the Associated Press, where he originally began his career as an undergraduate at St. Joseph's University. In addition to journalism, Aaron spent 11 years as a classroom teacher, and he currently works as a senior academic designer at McGraw-Hill. He is the author of A Soaring Season, the incredible, inspiring story of the 2003-2004 St. Joseph's Hawks. His second book, Are You Kidding Me? The incredible, inspiring story of Allen Iverson and the 2001 Philadelphia 76ers, which is going to be released in early 2027. We will be discussing both tonight. His books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the Kindle Store, Google Play Books, and other purchasing platforms. Let's get into it. All right, Aaron, how are you?
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for joining. How's Philly?
Oh, it's awesome right now. Everybody's hyped. The World Cup in Philly, 6 games in Philly. The city's been just on fire. 250th anniversary. Of course, Sixers could have gone a little farther, although I know you would say the same about your Celtics.
Yeah.
Phillies are doing pretty well. The Eagles are, they've had a nice run. So, yeah, everybody's pretty happy. Flyers had a nice run this year.
Yeah, they did. They did. Speaking of World Cup, I actually went to the World Cup in Boston Stadium this past weekend. It was Scotland and Morocco. And we were at a fan experience right outside the stadium, right? It's called Gillette Stadium, by the way. It's not Boston Stadium. But nonetheless, we were at fan experience, and Michelob Ultra is the proud sponsor of FIFA, right? So that was the only thing available. And there was a couple of Scottish guys in front of me, and they were like, so how good's this beer? And I was like, it's all right. It's a mix of like Bud Light and Budweiser. It's light beer. And they go, oh, really? We're not really a fan of Bud Light. We've been drinking that in Boston the entire time, that and Sam Adams. So he goes up to the front. He takes 2 sips, and he goes, lad, this sucks. And I was like, it was so funny just to be there. But so, yeah, it's been a bright spot for New England. And, obviously in the metropolitan area, we know Philly, we know New York has been hitting on all cylinders when it comes to the World Cup. So what an event to be a part of. But we're not here to talk about the World Cup. We're here to talk about the 03 and 04 St. Joseph's basketball team, along with Allen Iverson and that 2001 Philadelphia 76ers team. Pride and joy, Allen Iverson of mine. When you first decided to write about the 03 and 04 St. Joe's basketball team, what immediately came to your mind, Aaron?
I just thought it was a great story, having kind of lived through it and having seen that team. It's just the classic underdog, Mark. That school, St. Joe's, is a small school, underfunded. The gym at the time was really a gym. It wasn't even as big as many high school gyms. The players were under-recruited, including the star players, Jameer Nelson, Delonte West. Phil Martelli, the head coach, didn't get an opportunity to be the head coach until he was 40 years old. He sat on the bench at St. Joe's as an assistant coach for 10 years, was passed over the first time the job came open. So it just had all these ingredients for just this classic underdog story. And they ended up being the number one team in the country. Like, as unlikely as it was, nearly made the Final Four. Really should have been in the Final Four, quite honestly. Just a kind of a blown play, buzzer beater by John Lucas, John Lucas out of Oklahoma State. So I just thought it was a cool story, and no one had written a book about it, and I thought I would have access to the players and the coaches. And I just dove in. I thought it would be fun to tell.
Yeah, and you talked about Jermaine Nelson, and I can't help but think about Jermaine Nelson as like the glue of every team he's always been on, right? And it kind of carried a leadership role and be that floor general. With his time with Orlando Magic, we know it was Dwight Howard and Hedo Turkoglu, but Jermaine Nelson was just as important as all those players on that team. But what stood out to you the most about his game and his presence?
Well, a little anecdote, and then I'll answer your question. He nearly was in your neck of the woods at UMass. If you remember, Bruiser Flint was the coach at the time, and he recruited Jameer heavily to UMass. Jameer really liked Bruiser. Bruiser had a connection at Chester High School where Jameer went, but Jameer drove back from UMass to Chester on a weekday, hit all this New York City traffic on the way home, and was like, nah, man, I can't do that.
I'm good.
But to answer your question, the thing that stood out to me the most about Jameer was just, obviously he had a game that was just elite, but his ability to make everyone around him better, like he knew how to get the best out of every player. And it started with himself. Like, one story from the book, he would go into practices and he'd be like, yo, man, like, I'm out here trying. Like, he acted like he was trying out for the team. Like, that's how hard he went at practice. And he let everyone know, like, no one's spot is guaranteed, including mine. So when your best player, when your star player is practicing like he's the 15th player on the bench, like that hard every single day, everyone follows suit. And then just game to game, like he knew when to score. He did this in the NBA too. He knew when to score. He knew when to assist. He knew who to pick up. He knew when he needed to maybe play a little more defense. Like, he just had this uncanny ability. It's almost this, like, you can't even like measure it, but just this uncanny ability to do whatever the team needed to win.
Yeah, it's like within his instinct to, like,
Absolutely.
His consciousness, right? And I also, part of the book, they talk about Jermaine Nelson doing a lot of recruiting for a lot of guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I guess what's his presence like with recruiting?
Well, one of the interesting things was Delonte West was a very under-recruited player in Maryland, partly because there were two other Division I players on his high school team. He was a bit of a late bloomer, kind of was all over the place, kind of was positionless in some ways. So he wasn't being highly recruited. His top choices were Towson, Siena, and Manhattan. And St. Joe's was on the list. And he went to St. Joe's and played one-on-one with Jameer, went back and told his high school coach, I want to play with that guy.
Yeah.
There were a couple other guys too. Pat Carroll, who was the great shooter on that team, played against Jameer in high school, then played in an all-star tournament with him, the Donofrio and Concha Hawken, and was like, hey, I know he's going to make me better. Dwayne Jones, who was a big man on that team, who's now an assistant coach at St. Joe's, also is from Chester. So, yeah, a lot of people gravitated toward Jameer before even playing at St. Joe's. And then he is that personality where people gravitate to, even to this day.
Yeah, and kind of to transition, I'm glad you mentioned Delonte West, because for me, being as a Celtics fan, it would just be remiss if I didn't mention him, because, when you think of his presence and his impact, like, you weren't really surprised if he came out and shot 30, but you would be surprised, if he came out and had, no toughness, no competitiveness. Like, this dude was all about being incredibly competitive, his toughness. And, I think, like you mentioned, Martelli actually spotting him early and wanting him right away. And so was that competitive edge really the engine that drove his game?
Absolutely, Mark. And you hit the nail on the head with the competitiveness, and a couple stories from the book. And there's a lot in the book about Delonte. Talked to a lot of people, got a lot of insights. So I think Boston fans would really enjoy even just to read it for Delonte. But
Yes.
Phil Martelli went to recruit at a summer showcase, the College of New Jersey in Ewing, New Jersey. He did not go there to recruit Delonte West, but he saw Delonte West on one play crash. The baskets were on tennis courts, so they were just kind of set up in the summer on tennis courts. Delonte crashed into the stanchion of the basket, and everyone was like, "Ooh, ah," thinking this guy like knocked himself out. Delonte gets up. He sprints full court back to defense. Phil Martelli did not come to recruit Delonte, but after seeing that one play, he said, "That's the guy I want." And then Phil told me in all of his years in coaching, he started coaching in 1976. He retired from Michigan 2 years ago. He's never had a player as competitive as Delonte. And he said Delonte would go not 99.9%, 100% in every single thing he did, every drill, every practice. And one other quick story that I think people will like, Dave Mallon, who was a reserve player on that team, came to St. Joe's, very heralded career in high school at upstate New York, and they were scrimmaging in a preseason scrimmage. And it was their air conditioning was broken in the gym.
Yeah.
And their team lost the 5-on-5 game. Dave Mallon left to get water, and Delonte said, "Yo, where are you going?" And Dave said, "I'm thirsty. I'm going to get some water." He said, No water. We're running it back right now.
Get back out here.
Get back out here. So that was the kind of competitive drive. Lots of stories. But Delonte was just amazing.
I mean, think about it too, from like his NBA career. Like, he joined the Cleveland Cavaliers, he joined the Dallas Mavericks, right? He was a big part of those teams. I mean, in 01, right? Didn't he, like, when LeBron made it to the finals, right? Delonte, I know it's a little bit before Delonte's time, but my point is, like, he kind of just fit that mold when LeBron needed him the most. So it was really cool to see. And like well thought of when it comes to D West, because we love him in New England. So you mentioned Phil Martelli, right? He is actually a familiar name here in Rhode Island. His son actually coached for Bryant. I know you probably knew about that, but probably some people did not. But why Martelli? Why was he such a perfect fit for that St. Joe's team, especially being a Pennsylvania native as well?
Phil just knew how to get the best out of people. I think he obviously knew the game well. He was a longtime basketball player and coach, but for him, it wasn't so much about X's and O's as pushing the right buttons with people for relationships. And he just was the perfect coach for that team. And he was also very out front. He's very media savvy, very media friendly. And as the heat came on that team, Phil stayed out in front of it. He kind of took a lot of the pressure away from that team because a lot of the focus was on Phil and his media personality. And I think that helped somewhat, but I don't think you can underestimate the job that he did as a coach. And also just putting that team together, him and his staff, just kind of knowing how the pieces would fit. Yeah. And really just to getting the best out of that team. But he's always been someone I felt that really connected well with people. And I always felt like he knew how to push the right buttons to get the best out of people.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, Aaron, too. Like, I was thinking about this the other day, and you look at positionless basketball now, it kind of ruins like the like fluidity of a team, right? Like knowing each other's role, like point guard, floor general, right? Shooting guard, being able to shoot the ball, small forward, do the little things, find a way to be a two-way player, right? And then like the power forward center position, like being able to play in the paint and on the block and get rebounds and block shots. We kind of lose track of like the like familiar side of it and validity side of it when it comes to position basketball. And I feel like the St. Joe's team was like made for that moment. Like, Dwayne Jones like played a huge factor, being the paint guy. and you had Delonte West being the hard-nosed attacking type of, scorer, and then, Carroll being the shooter that he was. And then you had, Jameer Nelson, taking over games with his leadership role and being the floor general. Like, do you miss the fact that that component is no longer really a part of the game of basketball anymore?
I do. And I think someone like Jameer would probably, well, he was already under recruited because of his height. He was only 5'11".
Right.
But he probably would not have been recruited in high school because he was recruited because he was a floor general, Mark, because Monte Ross, who was the assistant coach, saw him Jameer didn't put up a lot of numbers, but
Right.
Monte saw the way that he ran the team, the way that he orchestrated the offense, the way players responded to him, a lot of the intangibles, like you mentioned, the instinct stuff, and he loved them right away. But the true point guard has kind of evaporated. And, I love the game. I think the NBA is great. I covered almost every 76ers game this year. It's amazing. But the game has just changed. It's not necessarily for the better or worse. It's just changed. But someone like Jameer, who's now I think Jameer was good enough where he would have been able to evolve his game, and he did. He became a better shooter as he got into the NBA. He extended his range and whatnot. But just someone who's a great point guard, I can't even really think of one who's just, because you have to do so many things now. You're not, that's just not the way the game is played.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of an all around point guard. You're totally right. I mean, the guy that we always think of is Jason Kidd or Steve Nash or, John Stockton back in the day. Right. But I guess there is no more kind of that natural position. But let's talk about the success for St. Joe's. That team went 30-2, right? And the only time that they lost was in the A10 championship and the NCAA run, right? So I guess when you look at the big picture of their season, how impressive was that season for being a non-traditional powerhouse?
Oh, incredibly impressive. When you run off, nearly an undefeated regular season, you do that in any sport at any level, and especially when you're playing in a conference, when you're playing conference games, it's so hard to beat opponents that really know you and know you well. And at that time, as you know, Mark, the players were staying in school. So the opposing coaches, they knew Delonte West's tendencies. They knew Jameer's tendencies, and still they were not able to stop him. They were not able, and St. Joe's was just, they were just crushing teams up until the end of the season. Rhode Island almost beat them in the final regular season game, or second to last regular season game. But to go undefeated is an incredible accomplishment. And I researched it. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it hasn't happened very many times since where a team has run the regular season. So it's an incredible accomplishment for anyone, and particularly for a school like St. Joe's. Like I said, an underfunded, under-budgeted, little gym, under-recruited players, for them to do it. And then to make such a great run in the NCAA tournament. They did lose to Xavier in the Atlantic 10 opener. Xavier ended up almost getting to the Final Four as well. Very good Xavier team that year. But St. Joe's nearly made it to the Final Four. And there are people today, Mark, that still think, like, UConn won the national title that year. Georgia Tech was in the championship. There are a lot of people that think St. Joe's would have beaten Georgia Tech and would have given UConn a run. Now, UConn had Emeka Okafor and Ben Gordon, two great players. But it was really an amazing accomplishment. And frankly, I don't think we'll ever see it again from a school like St. Joe's because of the nature of college basketball today. It's hard. You can't. A Jameer and a Delonte, those guys would have never stayed at St. Joe's after a year or two in today's era of college basketball. So it's just a remarkable achievement that likely will be not repeated.
Yeah, I'm a PC Providence College season ticket holder, right? So, I've been for about 17 years now. And, I don't like URI at all. So that's why I am glad to talk about St. Joe's basketball in the A10. And that's all truly that matters with the A10 right now is this conversation. So, but Aaron, I want to switch gears because my friend, you are coming out with a book about the guy, the GOAT, Allen Iverson. From one small guard to another, right? We're flipping, sides with Jermaine Nelson to Allen Iverson. What stood out to you when you decided to write about AI and that 2001 Philadelphia 76ers team?
Kind of similar to the St. Joe's story in a way, is that I felt like I lived through it. I covered that team, and it was such a captivating team. Like that team, that's 2001 76ers team, Mark. They captured Philadelphia sports fans unlike almost any other team.
NBA fans.
Yeah,
NBA
I mean, and it was
there.
They didn't win the championship, but like
No.
the Eagles have won a couple Super Bowls, the Phillies have won a World Series, but like that 76ers team in many ways was more popular, and largely because of Iverson and what he was able to do on the court and off the court. And I think that's the thing about Iverson. If you talk about him on the court, you never saw and probably will see someone who played every possession and every game as hard as he did. And obviously talented and dynamic, but just so hard. He famously said, "I play every game like my last." And it was, worth the price of admission every day. And then off the court, he was and remains today a cultural icon. He changed the NBA. And one of the best chapters in the book, I think, is I talked to a lot of the current NBA players, many of the stars, Kevin Durant, Giannis, as they were coming through Philly this year, about Iverson's impact. And they just give him nothing but flowers for what he was able to do and how he was able to really change the culture and really allow people to be more accepting of people like Iverson had the tattoos and the cornrows and the hip hop style. Like now everyone has it, but people won't remember if they weren't around. Like that wasn't the case then, and that wasn't accepted then. Today it's accepted, but he really was the first one to really kind of change the perception. He took a lot of heat for it, as you remember. But so those two things, his play on the court, his impact off the court, and that team was just awesome.
Yeah, I think he just broke the ice when it comes to swagger. Like, baggy clothes, like you said, cornrows, like the I3 logo, like the answers, the questions. I was a huge fan, man. I had every jersey, I had every shoe. He was my guy. Yes, I was a Celtics fan growing up, but like everybody, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, we talk about a lot in this podcast, but it's all about like gravitating to somebody, on a team where you're like, I want to be that guy one day. And like, AI with the crossover and stuff like that. It's unbelievable. It's an uncanny characteristic that he truly had, within his genes. And you mentioned like the interviewing, right? You had 50 people that you interviewed in your upcoming book that will be released in 2027. So was there a particular story or interaction? I know you brought up the Giannis part of it, but that really stuck out during the process that you would like to share?
Oh, there were so many. One of the really interesting kind of subplots to that season was Theo Ratliff. He was a really good defensive player. One of the pieces that Larry Brown brought in early in Larry Brown's tenure, someone who could anchor the defense. He was also very athletic, could get on the other end of dunks from Iverson. And Theo got hurt in the middle of that season in December. And there was some question as to whether he was going to be able to come back and play in the playoffs and be effective. And I talked to Theo at length about that. He ended up being traded for Dikembe Mutombo. At the time, it was a very sort of controversial trade in Philadelphia. The 76ers were 41-14 at the time, and yet they made the move because they thought Theo wouldn't be able to play in the playoffs, or at least at the level. And of course, Shaq was looming with the Lakers, and the 76ers, Billy King, and he was general manager. They thought that Dikembe would maybe match up with Shaq. But I talked to Theo at length, and it's really interesting, his perspective on the trade. And even today, like as much as he loved and supported that team, and he really did, he felt like they were brothers. Like he's still today, you can sense the sort of the disappointment and the hurt in some ways at the trade, and he thought he was going to be ready to play. So I had never seen Theo talk at length as much as he did to me about the trade, about the season. So I think people are going to find that interesting. And just going through like the season, and like people forget what happened with Iverson. He almost got traded that summer before. Larry Brown was just tired of him, and
sick
so
of his crap.
yeah, almost got traded, and then he came out with a rap album and training camp. Like there's so many subplots. They started 10-0, but just getting the inside sort of scoop and perception from the players, people around the team. It was really interesting. I think people are going to really enjoy reliving the story, and those who weren't around then are going to enjoy living it for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I totally forgot about the Theo Ratliff trade, for Dikembe Mutombo. So that's something that I just realized. So much like the 03 and 04 Hawks, right? The 2001 Sixers team was really built like a family, right? Everyone embraced their role, from Aaron McKie scoring to Eric Snow's leadership to Dikembe Mutombo's defensive dominance. Allen Iverson, as we know, the GOAT scorer, the prowess that he had throughout his course of his career was just uncanny. What made that team so memorable?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said in the beginning, Mark. Everyone accepted their role, and that's so rare today and hard today. The best teams do that. I think we saw that, quite frankly, a lot with the Knicks. Is that players on that 76ers team, like they knew Allen was going to be able to score. In fact, Larry Brown recognized that early. The 76ers had Allen Iverson and Jerry Stackhouse in the backcourt. Like you would think that would be an awesome backcourt, but they both needed the ball. They both needed to score. Larry saw that, traded Jerry Stackhouse for Theo Ratliff and Aaron McKie. And he got in Theo, a guy who was very happy just playing defense and blocking shots. In Aaron McKie, a guy who would do whatever you needed. He was a sixth man of the year that year. Eric Snow was a point guard. He was like the third point guard on Seattle. No one really knew about him. And the Sixers got him for like a cup of coffee, a second round pick. But he was just he would do the assist, and then like Allen could drive to the basket, and Eric would always be there defensively to pick up Allen's man on any kind of transition. So I think the role acceptance and the willingness to, and really Larry Brown kind of set the tone to let Allen be Allen. But Allen also was, I don't want to say conformed, because I don't think Allen would like the word conform, but I'm going to use the word because nothing else comes to mind. He was willing to sacrifice a bit of his game to get others involved when they needed to. And that was something that he had not done prior to that. So I think it's a combination of the role acceptance and Allen kind of really seeing Larry Brown's point to try and get his teammates more involved so that some of the pressure would be taken off him. And then he would be able to do his thing when push came to shove, crunch time, etc. But I think those are really the two things that made that team so great.
Yeah, I really believe like the development of like his game, the maturation process, I guess you could say, on the court, like it really became a thing. And that's why, you saw it, throughout the course of that season. They just became such a powerhouse, in the East. So let's talk about Larry Brown, because I've watched documentaries on Larry Brown and Allen Iverson, and they clashed in many ways. But in a way, like I feel like he was kind of like the hard-nosed dad that wanted the best out of him, right? So I guess like when you look at like him being the perfect coach for Allen Iverson, is that true?
It is, and Allen has admitted that. It's a fascinating relationship because you had old school versus new school. A lot of different, the cultural change, but they were very similar in a way. Like Larry was this, like he never stayed in one spot. He was always moving around different places, both in college and pro, but he always got the best out of every team that he ever coached.
Right.
And he did things very much his way, very similar to Allen. So you had these two guys who were they had a ton of self-belief. They did things their way. And I don't think either of them really liked to be challenged, but Larry was the coach. And I think when Allen saw, there was a real turning point, and Allen's talked about this and he talks about it in the book, when he realized that Larry wanted the best out of Allen and wanted the best out of the team. Early on, Allen took what Larry was saying as criticism, as if like, yo, man, you're putting me down. I don't need to hear all, that kind of stuff. When he realized that he's really just trying to get the best out of Allen, that's when they turned the corner. And it really happened in that 2000-2001 season, the culmination of which might have been at the All-Star game when Allen was named the MVP. And he very famously started the interview by saying, "Where's my coach?" looking around for Larry Brown. And I think that's when the relationship really cemented itself. But I will say, like, after that season, the next season wasn't so great either. Larry ends up leaving the Sixers. So I really feel like that was kind of lightning in a bottle. But they both, since that season, have spoken about how much each has meant to the other.
Yeah, you think about it too, like, you talked about the, how special the 01 team is, but like you look at, Michael Jordan in his days with the Bulls, right? Every story has an end, right? And it's unfortunate, but sometimes that's just the way history goes. But at the same time, like their relationship, I think is just, it's funny. It's awesome. It's different. I think that's the best word to describe it. It's just different. So, Aaron, you've written about St. Joe's basketball. You've covered Allen Iverson and the 01 Sixers with a book releasing in 2027, which we will have you back on to talk about for sure. What's next on the Philly topic?
I have a bunch of ideas, Mark. The first book was so awesome to do, and I had so much fun doing it. When I was writing the St. Joe's book, I wrote down a bunch of ideas that I had for another book, including Allen Iverson, which is the one I settled on. But before I wrote the Allen Iverson book, I kind of started and stopped on a few ideas. Nothing was really nothing clicked quite right. And but I would like to circle back. I kind of want to see how this Iverson book does, how it's received, how it sells. And because as much fun as I had, as exhilarating as it was to write both the books, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's hard.
Right now I'm just kind of chilling a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of, poking around at some ideas, keeping my eyes and ears kind of plugged to the ground to see what might be out there. And I do hope there is a third book in me, at least a third, maybe more.
Gotcha. Before you go, we got to talk about the NBA draft real quick. How do you feel about your draft pick last night?
I honestly don't know a ton about them, and I was out of town yesterday, so I didn't get to go to the media event at the 76ers. But from all indications, everything I've read, like they love him. They think not only is they like him as a player, and Gansey has talked about that, and Jameer is the sort of the assistant GM. His title is not assistant GM, right. But they want good people that want to be in Philly, people that want to win. And I think that's what they got. And we'll have to see on the court. I know there are some people that are concerned, like, well, they already have Maxey, they already have VJ, now they have another guard. But you never can really have enough depth at the guard position. Obviously, you need big guys too. It's like anything else. At the 22nd pick in the draft, we'll see what kind of impact he can have. But, right now, the feelings are positive.
Yeah, I do like, his presence at Alabama. He was a real good scoring guard. So, yeah, I get the point with, Edgecombe and Maxey, but I don't think that's really going to stir up drama. I think it's just going to compliment everybody. So I think that's the best way to describe this podcast. We had a great time here, Aaron. Appreciate you making the time.
Anytime, Mark. Thanks. It was a load of fun.